thing which comes to my mind is that if you look at the history of corporate governance, not only in India but across the world, you will find that it has been evolving over a period of time. And every change or development has brought into focus new areas to concentrate on and also highlighted new challenges and new problems. There used to be a feeling across the world that concentrated shareholding is a bad thing. And that led to a lot of problems in corporate governance. And the panacea for that for some time, some decades in fact, was that there should be widespread shareholding. The more widespread the shareholding is, the better it is for governance of that company. If we go into the crisis of late 1920s and early 1930s in the USA, the whole problem was, at least perceived at that time, on account of lack of responsibility and accountability on the part of the promoters. So what information was given out about the company, what accounts were submitted, and whether the accounts submitted by different companies were standardized or not. There were problems with regard to insider trading, there were problems with regard to market manipulation. Things went substantially down. And then in 1934, we had the US SEC come in. After that, for certain decades, the feeling was that promoter-driven, concentrated shareholding is a bad thing. And the corporate America and many parts of the world, they moved towards well-diversified shareholding, where people owned hardly 1% or even less than 1%. But the outcome and unintended outcome of that was that the managers became the owners. Those who were managing the company, they started working like the owners. And the corporate boards became like clubs, where people associated with you, known to you, who are very familiar to you, they came into the board. In fact, the term came in that we have what is called the short sleeve directors. So directors with whom you are very familiar, they are your friends in any domain and things like that. They started coming in. And the shareholders had very little opportunity to have their grievances redressed. The matter went to an extent that not only shareholders, consumers started feeling the pinch. And then in 1970s, the movement began with the consumer activists coming in the forefront, for at least initially. And then there were changes brought about. And in 1977, 78, US SEC came out with the requirement that the accounts have to be of a certain standard, and the audit committee has to have a certain role and a certain constitution. The NYSE also then came out with certain directions. So the first point I want to make is that what is the shareholding of a company per se, it is not the solution. But a very important development has taken place after 1980s in the rest of the world and also in India. India, it is a recent development. And Amit rightly mentioned about stewardship and about the growth of the mutual fund and other institutional investors in the country. Earlier, we used to have large number of very small investors. Now we have a small number of investors who are representing large number of shareholders. So these institutional investors have their own conditionalities, their own compulsions. They have to follow a certain discipline. There are requirements from their own members. A pension fund, for example, can decide that they will not like to be part of a of a company which is, for example, working in a war effort or working in degradation of the climate and things like that. Those things are bringing in a lot of pressure on the corporate boards. So today, the evolution, at least for now, is in a direction where, in India particularly, the promoters have close to 50%, I'm talking of BSE 500 companies, close to 50% shareholding. But the institutional investors today, both foreign and domestic, are close to around 42%. This is a very important development, and this is putting a lot of pressure on the corporate boards about what is to be done and what should not be done. I'm finding that this report which IIS has brought out today, it has highlighted certain developments and also pointed out certain problems and areas of improvement. Personally, my biggest grudge is lack of separation of chairman and managing director in corporate India. This report, which is about to be released, it points out that in 2023, the number was 68, where we had separate chairman and managing director. That number has come down to 60. So we are moving absolutely in the other direction. And to all of us in this room, it doesn't require a lot of deliberation to think that there is no such thing as self-appraisal so far as corporate performance is concerned. In all our professional life, we have self-appraisal, but there are people above us who have a look at it. If somebody is the managing director or the CEO, and he or she is also presiding over the board, where her performance is being reviewed, then what is the outcome going to be? The problem gets further compounded if the same person is also the majority shareholder. Then the problem is even more difficult. It's aggravated to a very large extent. And while the report talks about the number having gone down from 68 to 60, if you look at the number of people, or number of boards where the chair is an independent director, that number has also gone down this year. So it is for all of us here and the boards we represent or the professions that we are in to talk about it, to think about it, that what is the direction in which we are going. In 2022, SEBI came out with a requirement after Kotak Committee recommendation that the chairman and MD should be separate. It would be mandatory. And there was a provision that how many companies will come in the first lot and then later. Kotak Committee had not recommended that the chairman and managing director should be independent. Chairman should be independent. But SEBI, in its judgment, became more optimistic, and they proposed that the chairman should be independent. I would like to remind all of you that when SEBI first proposed that there should be one woman director in the board, initially SEBI didn't say that the woman director has to be an independent woman director. And there was a reason behind it. SEBI knew that any such thing would be seriously opposed and there would be heavy lobbying. In fact, I received representations that we do not have enough qualified women to be in the boards. And my question to them used to be that we have so many lakhs of women engineers, we have women bankers, we have all sorts of professionals, and we can't find even 1,000 or 2,000 women qualified enough to be in the board. So when that idea got established, then SEBI came out that this woman independent director has to be an independent director. In the case of separation of chairman and managing director, in being very optimistic, they came out with the idea that it has to be independent. And we all know that corporate India was very unhappy about it, and things happened, representations were made, and finally SEBI had to bow down. That I regard as a serious setback. Because if we had started with separate, at least to begin with, and then gone in for independent, things would have been different. So my biggest grievance today is, and my complaint is, that we, all of us here, we should make a move towards having a separate chairman and a managing director. Nothing prevents us. For example, while SEBI rules also says that voluntarily they can do it. But I would like to understand how many companies have voluntarily done it. Very few. So this is one area. The second area about which I'm concerned is the area of succession planning. In all the boards, and I find that there are some compliance officer and company secretary sitting here, in all the boards, this is an agenda which is discussed, and the management says, yes, we have a succession planning in place, it is recorded. But actually, I find that the heart is not there on succession planning, particularly at the level of CEO and executive directors. And what is also happening that even for people at the next level, the KMP level or the SMP level, there is no serious effort. I'm making a general comment. I'm not talking about any particular company. According to my understanding, a lot has to be done about it, which is not being done. And here I have another observations, that prior to COVID, we used to have in-person meetings. And some of you may disagree with me on this point, but my view is, COVID brought out this requirement or this permission or provision that you can have online meetings. 6 years after COVID has gone, we still have online meetings maybe 90% of the times, because it is very convenient. Earlier, when the meetings used to take place, the board members, especially the non-executive board members, had an occasion to interact with the SMPs and KMPs. They used to find some insight about how to evaluate them. You see, on the one hand, the NRC today is expected not only to select or recommend for selection the KMPs and also the board members, they are also required to have a view on the pipeline which is there for KMPs. And for a whole year you have no interaction with the SMPs. How will you have a view on the pipeline? So basically what can happen, and perhaps it is happening that way, that majority of the recommendations of the management are accepted. And what sorts of meetings are we having? Somebody is having the board meeting while traveling in a car, somebody is in the airline seat and saying that in 10 minutes my flight will take off, so please complete the agenda, and things like that. So this is again an idea which I have, and I have some feelings, strong feelings on this, that if we actually want the board to give a direction towards the SMPs, KMPs, and the pipeline for recruitment, and also to understand the business. I won't be surprised if there are companies where a director has not visited the office, not visited any plant. If it is a manufacturing company, he has not visited that plant. So obviously it will have some repercussion on the outcome that we are expecting from these companies. In this report, I find there is a very good para on gender parity and what percentage of women are there in the boards. But here also, I find that there is a very good analysis in this report that companies where there are more than 30% in the workforce, there are women, those companies, the number of such companies which are having more than 30% women in the workforce, that has gone down. From 24 in 2023, it has gone down to 18. So again, this is an indication that something needs to be thought about, something needs to be done. And also, while one woman independent director, that percentage has gone up, that is for sure. But as I mentioned, number of 2 women independent directors or 3 women independent directors, those instances are not very large. Also, I find that only 5% of women are chairperson of the board. So again, this is an area where focus is required. And it is not something which is an activist thing which is in mind. When SEBI introduced that there have to be women in the board, the whole idea was that a board has to have diversity. And that diversity was primarily from the point of view of having different points of view in the board discussions. If everybody in the board, and you know that in many Western countries, there used to be a problem, I don't know what is the situation now, there used to be a problem that people were only of a certain ethnic background and gender background. Gradually, there is a need to have these people in the board, primarily also because if we have moved away from majority shareholder protection, which used to be the mantra for a very, very long time, from protecting the majority shareholder interest to protecting the interest of the minority shareholder. And now we are rightly at the place where we are talking about protecting the interest of all the stakeholders, which includes the customers, which includes the employees, which includes the community. So if we actually believe in that, then the board and the workforce should also reflect that. And unfortunate part is that all over the world, but mainly so in India, things move only when something is made mandatory. For all of us sitting in this room, the idea should be that some of these principles, if we actually believe in that, it should also be done voluntarily. Because there is a risk that if you bring everything or every aspect through a mandatory provision, then it becomes excessive regulation, which has its own sets of problems. I also find that there is one area, and Amit, this is for you and your team, perhaps one area where we can in this report in future concentrate or highlight is the area of cyber preparedness. We all know the risks involved, and every day we hear what is happening, and in fact, nobody is an expert on cyber matters tomorrow. Today you may be an expert, and tomorrow you are completely behind the curve and you don't know what is happening. So this is one area where we should perhaps also now try, going forward, to give an indication of what is happening. My feeling is that I mean, you know, we have a $5 trillion market cap. And here we have institutional investors now having 42%, 43% shareholding. So what role the gatekeepers can play, that is all we can talk here. I mean, we are not running a particular company, but the gatekeepers have a very important role to play. Whether it is the auditors or whether it is the credit rating agencies, whether it is the proxy firms. Amit, I'm very thankful for you to acknowledge that in India we have the regulation for proxy firms. And I must tell this audience that when we were considering that, we consulted the proxy firms and whether they would like to be included or not. And I'm very happy to report that they all said, yes, please go ahead and do it. And it's a very light touch regulation, but it number one, gives a stature and a status, and number two, it avoids any conflict of interest. In the USA, the problem is more severe, because with every change of government, the whole idea about the proxy firms coming and their reports being evaluated in a particular manner, or they have to report in a particular manner, those things get changed. But in India, fortunately, we have a situation where the proxy firms can point out what is happening, and they can have a view on the resolutions. The stewardship thing in India, in my view, has progressed quite well. Initially, there were lack of clarity on the way it should function, but now over the last decade or so, this has gone in the right direction. Some of you may not be aware that India was again the first country in the world where credit rating agencies were regulated, as early as 2001. And when the last global financial crisis took place, people started complaining about bad behavior on the part of the credit rating agencies. But in India, that regulation is in place since 2001. So we have made progress. The point is, what is the direction in which we are planning to go? And in that direction, 2 or 3 things which are strongly in my mind, I try to highlight, but all of you can deliberate over the day and also highlight and point out what are the other areas of improvement. I must compliment IIIS for doing this work so seriously over the last 10 years. Because laws are made, regulations are drafted, some of these are implemented. If they are not implemented, then there can be regulatory action. But what is the general state of affairs so far as the practice is concerned? That this report will help us understand. Because it very seriously, very scientifically, it tries to find out on various parameters, and they have a whole set of questions. They try to find out what is happening. And finally, they also then come to a recommendation and give a status of what is not happening and what is happening. So a wide dissemination of the report will be in the interest of entire ecosystem, the entire corporate world and the investor world. So I thank you once again for inviting me, and thank you all very much. Thank you.